to this computer. Okay, we are recording. It is Wednesday, April 25, 2018. Today is session 10 of 11. And we're going to talk about the Moon Rabbit story, which was composed by a client of a student in this course last semester. And then we'll discuss our own work with ourselves and with our clients. Okay, so Bronwyn, you said you'd had a chance to look through the Moon Rabbit story and the woman's life story?
Yes.
Great. Did anyone else have a chance to look at it? Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I feel that this case study, you know, the life story together with the healing story, is a classic. I'm calling it a classic, and I believe it is a case study to pin the whole field of storytelling studies on, in the sense that storytelling therapy. It is an emerging field. Most people have never heard of it. People have heard of drama therapy, even if they've never seen it or done it. But of course, storytelling therapy is not in the general vocabulary. So sooner or later, somehow or other, there's going to be a book entitled Storytelling Therapy or On the Road to Storytelling Therapy. And I feel this case study should be a chapter in that book to show an example of what can be done. So, well, let me just try to remember why I was so thrilled by this story. For the benefit of anyone who's watching this recording who has not read the material, the client had a difficult young life. Father was not there much of the time, and mother was having some kind of depression, a problem, I think, with depression, maybe something else. And so the girl was on her own a lot, and she had a pet rabbit, a white rabbit. And then one day when the girl was about 9 years old, the rabbit was killed by a neighbor's dog. So there was this bloody, torn up carcass of a rabbit, and the 9-year-old girl had to gather herself. You know, she was weeping. She was so upset that her pet was killed, but she gathered it up and dug a hole and buried the rabbit. And according to her own life story, this gave her a sense of accomplishment, that she had been able to do this, something that should have been done by adults, but the adults were not there. Okay, and then her parents broke up, and she lived with her mother. Then she lived with her father, but she wasn't really treated well. And then an amazing thing she did was write to a local school, a very famous boarding school, which I don't mention in the. I edited it out of the case study, but a well-known boarding school for very wealthy people. But she wrote a letter asking to be admitted, and they admitted her and gave her a scholarship from, you know, grades like 6 to 12. Part of it was that her father had been a gardener for the school, but primarily, even at the age of 12 or whatever it is, when she wrote that letter, she was a good writer, and she had internalized a lot of literature, fairy tales and other stories, some of which her mother had given to her in the form of books and movies. So she associated her literature and her love of literature with her love of her mother. And so she had these fantasy characters who she pretended were, or she felt were protecting her, right? The the elder man, and I forget who the others were. Okay, so the first major thing was that she got into that school, and then some years later, during the summers, she spent time at she lived at a certain boarding house, which was very well known, it seems, and she met a lot of writers and painters there, and that was also an important event for her. So in the story, she transforms this experience into okay, the character in the story is alone, and a group of elder women come to visit her. And these women have long silver hair and very special clothing, and I think wearing precious stones. And they announce that they are a tribe or a group of healing women. And they come on a ship, and they invite her to go on the ship with them. And along the way, she sees the rabbit a few times in different ways, including on the moon. So she identifies the rabbit with the moon and the rabbit with these ladies. And I found that I had made up a little piece and added it to it. I had made up that the ladies, the healing ladies, had rings with the rabbit insignia on it. And when I went back and looked at it, when I looked at the story and the life story, there was nothing like that. But I had added that in my imagination because I felt it fit. Okay, so what the story meant to me was that this person, R, as we identify her, and she's the one who made up the healing story. She was able to deal with the loss of her mother and the loss of her father, the physical loss and the emotional loss, and the loss of the rabbit, by somehow imagining that a resurrection of the rabbit and a resurrection of her mother into this group of healing women. So that gave her hope and comfort and support, at least in her imagination, that she's surrounded by these women. And the story ends with her, she decides to go on the ship, but she can come back whenever she wants, and she's going to have a lot of adventures. Now, did I leave anything out, or would anyone add to or correct either the client's life story or the healing story? You got everything right?
Did I miss a document, because I was waiting to see how the story had worked for her. It was an amazing piece of storytelling and creativity, and I could kind of see how she was creating a story around her life, but I didn't see a document that said how it had worked for her. Case study needs to have how it's healing.
True. You know,
did I miss something? Otherwise, it would have been fascinating to see the parallels. And I didn't realise that she had they were resurrections of the rabbit and the mother. That's a lovely thought. That's beautiful. So was that written in there somewhere, or did I miss it? And did I miss it?
No, the follow-up has not yet been added to the case study. I sent an email to Tricia the other day asking her, and she hasn't replied. This woman works in some sort of halfway house for young people, so she's obviously helping young people in a way that she wished she had been helped, or that she. Oh, this is my wife. Just let me. Oh no, it's not my wife. I beg your pardon. I won't answer it. I will only answer for my wife. Yeah, so she's working there in Burlington. And by the way, I feel an important character in the story, or element of the story, is the location, Burlington, Vermont. for those who don't know, Burlington, Vermont. Hello, Sumaya. Is that Sumaya has just connected under someone else's name? She must be coming from someone else's house or somebody else's computer, but now she's off again. But for those of you who don't know, Burlington, Vermont is one of the centers of feminist and hippie culture, at least on the East Coast. There are many food collectives, vegetarian restaurants. In the 60s and 70s, I'm sure there were many communes. Vermont in general is a very progressive state. It's a very beautiful state. There's a lot of forest there, and most people in Vermont are progressive. So a lot of women, a lot of lesbian organizations are there, and a lot of healing organizations are there. There's a lot of work people do in Vermont with herbs, flower remedies and herbal remedies. Vermont is a center for that, and Burlington is the center in Vermont for that. A problem is that there are so many healers in Burlington that they don't get much work because there are not enough clients. There's too many healers and not enough clients. So economically, I think Burlington's having a hard time, and the people who live there are having a hard time. But as a cultural center, over the last, 50, 60 years, it is a leading light for those of us on the East Coast, those of us who used to live on the East Coast. So it's not an accident, I feel, that this Tricia, who took the course, lives in Burlington. Her client, who is such a fine writer and has such a fine imagination, she lives in Burlington. The client went to University of Vermont. I edited out a number of the details, for the sake of privacy of the client. I edited out the town where the client was born and lived. I edited out the name of the school. I did leave in the city of Burlington and the college because I felt those were important to the whole situation. But, the whole feminist movement grew up in the 60s and 70s together with the storytelling movement. And there has been a lot of work about goddesses, reconstructing, recreating, reimagining, reinventing ancient goddesses as models for women. And this, of course, is also related to the Wicca movement. People familiar with Wicca? Neo-pagan, where people actually, there are covens of witches. What's the male equivalent of a witch is a priest, I guess. I don't know how literally Wicca people take their divinities, whether they take them on a symbolic level or actually believe in the actual existence of certain divinities. But that kind of Wicca work, Wicca culture, including involving goddesses, that's grown up all together with the women's movement and the storytelling movement and Burlington, Vermont. So I feel that story is a kind of a salute to a celebration of Vermont culture as well as other things. Any other thoughts, questions, responses to that healing story or the life story?
I was just as a comment now on what on the background that you are saying where she really comes from, because I don't know Vermont. Mm-hmm. I was really it stroked me there is a very specific intrinsic feeling of magic within the healing story. It's not just any healing story. It has a lot to do. I mean, the moon already is a symbol of something which is beyond, is the unconscious, things that you can see or not see. So it gives, like, visually, I see very specific colors to all the images. But it really struck me that it's first full of details. It's not just about a very good writer who has the word, no, the possibility to express themselves very well. It has to do with knowing how to I don't know how to say, to knit, maybe it's to weave the story within a very magical context. So now you're explaining, this was my feeling when I read it. It's an amazing story. It helps me also for some things for myself to see how to invite symbology and how to weave it further in my life. But what now it's being explained to me, it's how important is really the background where she came from. If it was a feminist movement, it was a movement of already open-minded people that she could, of course, through the help and the company process, but she could, as you said, resurrect herself through her own healing tools, which is so beautiful. I'm really grateful that you shared this.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I mean, I'll stop maybe, and then I'll speak about the process I'm doing, but it really helped me. I don't know how much you have edited the life story, or this is exactly as it is from Trisha, but also it's interesting how she on how do you say, on what details she's putting a heavier point, you say in English, maybe, how do you say, a more importance and so on. So it's been really a learning curve for me through the details. It's a very feminine way of looking at observing things. This is really
I find it so touching that she loved her mother so much, and her mother was not available because of her mother's mental illness and other things. She says her mother was getting involved with bad men. So she didn't have her mother as she was growing older, but what she did have was a very rich internal life, imaginative, intellectual, creative life, which was in large part fostered and nurtured by her mother, because her mother had told her stories, read her stories, given her books, given her movies. So the mother's contribution to her was enough to see her through. And the fact that the girl at the age of 12 could put this together and write an application for this school, that I just find that so inspiring. That people can make the best of what they have and use their resources, and in certain cases, get into a wonderful situation. That's a life-changing process to get into a school like that, and be able to live there for 6 years through her teenage years, and it was all herself, but with the support and the background given to her by her parents. So we should never say that the imagination is useless or that fantasy is useless. Because through one's thinking and writing, one can get into many wonderful situations if one identifies oneself as a good thinker, and it can be attractive. Then people and institutions will invite you in. Go ahead, Smita.
Yeah. What was nice about the entire attachments, or what was the way the documentation had been done, so that kind of helps to understand the sequence with which the approach is very clear, and it's a very good learning. It's a good takeaway from the story. but what really struck me was the separate the specification about the internal voices. There was so much of, there's a separate how do I put this, so Trisha has actually separated or given it importance and prominence about the internal voices, correct? But it so happens that the internal voices are not except for the fairy, which actually has no gender, as it says. All the voices are male, wherein in the life story it seems that the person has had troubles and is influenced by the mother and the older sister. That was one thing. And so it gave a for me it's a very good approach. It's something different. I wouldn't think about talking to somebody about internal voices or the guardian, what you the word guardian angel, if it's good. It's nice. I kind of seeing a different I'm seeing it a different approach to it. I don't know how to say it, but I felt very elated reading only that particular page. I don't know how to describe it in words, but the prominence given to that, nice.
Yeah, I think first we have to be sure that the client is not really hearing voices. That's called schizophrenia, when somebody is really hearing voices which seem to have a full life of their own. Sumaya, can you possibly stabilize your phone? It keeps moving around. Try to put it in one position, prop it up at an angle, and just leave it in one position if you could.
I'm trying to use my computer.
Oh.
Okay, I will stabilize it.
Very good, very good. I'm sorry, Smita, what were we saying?
Internal voices?
Oh, yes. It can sound a little dangerous if we're saying this person's hearing voices. But once we establish that the client is aware that these are just imaginary voices, guardian angels, or however we want to say it, then I think when one can go about it, think about it in a relaxed and relaxed manner. There's nothing wrong with having, imaginary characters one can call upon and talk with. As long as, it doesn't get out of control.
I have something to say.
Go ahead.
First of all, too many power cuts here, so I'll be on and off and on and off. So every time I'm connecting, I'm missing some nice discussions here. But yes, when Bilyana mentioned about when you and Bilyana mentioned about the culture, I suddenly remember seeing a YouTube video which was about how culture connects to healing and recovery. So that's a very it was very nice, because I went to see the video after after a session sometime back. We discussed in one of the sessions how we can connect this life story to a story from the culture, or connecting oneself to an animal or anything else specific to that culture. So like, I think one of us even mentioned a sloth or something in Australia. Am I right?
A sloth?
Was there an animal which we talked about? I'm not sure.
A sloth.
Yeah,
a koala bear. Koala bear, yeah.
A koala bear. That's right, a koala bear. So that's when I went on to search this culture connect to the recovery, and there is this beautiful piece on pretty lot of videos which tells about how culture can influence in healing process and recovery.
Mhm.
I can send you the links. So that was one thing which struck me when you said that Vermont, she's from Vermont, and the story. And the second thing is what Smita said now about the internal voices. So yes, like what you said, it might sound a little too alarming for anybody who's reading it for the first time. But when I read the story, I was able to connect it with myself, because there has been a lot of times when I consider my grandfather to be my somebody who has always been there for me. So whenever I find myself in a difficult situation, or whenever I find that I need a solution to something, I find myself talking to him, or I find myself that there is something that he tells me. So I was personally able to relate to the internal voices that she was mentioning in the story. And it was only then I realized that that could be a very huge part in actually triggering a healing process in anybody. And another question I have is, will everybody be able to, when we are working with a client, will everybody be able to connect to an internal voice, or will they be able to tell something like that? Because I was able to relate to it, because I see myself doing it. But when we work with the client, I don't know. That's really confusing for me here.
Anyone else have a response to them?
I think it really depends how that person, or this is how I feel, of course. If you're able to catch that person's expression, to enter really in connection with somebody, so that you can go beyond the spoken words. No, I think this is also storytelling anyway. So to go within the real story of somebody, but that it's not just a story of words, means first of all to make a really deep connection, I think, with the client, with whomever you're seeing. So I think everybody has internal voices, meaning that everybody has something or some kind of reference, maybe you can say, or voice, or something that is always guiding you in life. This, I think, you can find it everywhere in everyone, but they would just have a very different way of expressing that. So I have the feeling it's going beyond the exact words that somebody is using within a story, life story, or a storytelling, and just hear the metaphors or the images which are behind. Or this is more or less what I'm aiming always to catch from the person whom I'm having in front. I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
No, maybe we shouldn't use the term voices. We should just say.
Yeah.
So, I suddenly remembered when Viliana was telling beyond the voices. I don't know. I remember reading this thing about emotional intelligence, where you try to find out what kind of a person is by just looking at the way they talk, whether they're a very visual oriented person, or are they a very they respond to sound, or they respond to feeling right from the words they are using. So probably, Biliana, if I'm listening in that way, I will be able to locate what kind of a person the client is, and probably look at framing the question in a different way, so that she or he would be able to tell me of any internal voices, if at all there is one.
Maybe one should avoid the term voices, because that does imply it does imply madness. Maybe it's just better to say, who are the characters in your memory? Who do you carry with you from your,
like points of reference? I would tell them. I think it's more like points of reference, you can say, reference points, person, characters. It can be something as well, not always a living person. It can be something which is a symbol, which is throughout life. People have patterns who repeat themselves, who might be a guiding pattern. Anyway.
Could be an ideology.
I remember two stories. One of them is Vasalisa story. I know if you, she received a doll when your mother died, before your mother died, and the doll talk with her, how a voice and how intuition voice, and I like so much this story, but one time I can understand better what what it means. When I read a biography, it's about one monkey life, a woman that lived in 12 years in a retreat in a cave, and in all her along her story, she talked about one voice that said her what she have to do or not have to do, and in some moments this voice could save her life, because she was taking care around your cave, and she listened this voice. She listened, go out, and she went out, and one stone caiu, one stone fall in this place, and along of all her story, her listen to this voice. And I think when we talk about this with a client, I think a reference can be if this voice said things that bring healing for the person or for other, and if this voice bring healing, bring clarity for the situation, I think it's this point can be a reference to know if it's good or not.
Good. Yes. So let's not get wrapped up with the term voice, because that character, that being, we also are interested in how it moves, and how it looks, how it feels. So it's just an element of the client's imagination or memory. And for the sake of this work, we can encourage the client, if it is a thing, as has been mentioned, if it is an ideology or if it is an institution, we can also suggest the idea that the client personify that thing as a character, just in a playful way. And the thing is that when we set up a little situation where we're asking these imaginary and remembered characters to speak, a lot comes out. This is done especially in psychodrama, but it's just basic role playing. So if you get to the point with a client or yourself where you want to really explore who these characters are, what they mean to you, what they mean to a client, if possible, set up a dialogue between that remembered figure and some other figure, and see what happens. Okay. This is really this is recommended going back to Carl Jung. He called this active imagination, to speak to and as elements in your memory and imagination. It's giving these elements a sense of pretending that they have a certain reality. And when you do that, they come to life, and a lot gets expressed and felt.
Yesterday, when I read the texts, the articles, I asked me if I remember one story I see in a video. I don't know how to say filming. In a Netflix series. Annie. Do you know Annie with A? When Annie with A. It's a girl. She lived a very hard story in her life, in her childhood, and I recommend you see. It's so beautiful. And when I read the texts, I ask if it's common to happy that people that live a hard story, if she take this resource of imagination, of listen other voices to how something can help her to live, and it's the question that I asked me.
Mm-hmm. And the point that I made was that in her case, her world of imagination was not just an escape. It was a means by which she got into a great school, and she got into a great community in Burlington, in this boarding house. So it really helped make her life in the real world, that she had such a rich imaginary life. Yes.
I have just about two things to say. Number one was you were mentioning about not using the term voices. I agree because it sounds spooky, and so I'm kind of finding see, the reason the even in the case study here, it's she has written it as a guardian angel. So when a person is going through a process in life, let's call it process, and at that time a streak of hope in any way, a voice, or the sensibility to do right and wrong. So in psychology, isn't this something called superego? Is it not? I'm not sure. There's some part of ego which makes you take the correct judgment between right and wrong, something like that. So but there is a psychological term, it's definitely not voices, but it's something which creates a kind of sort of judgment.
Well, this is Freud's theory of the personality, saying that the personality has three parts. Down below is the id, which is all about our urges to take this and have this and control this and devour this. So it's all, the id is very greedy and gluttonous and violent. And then that's on the bottom of the system. And then on the top of the system is the superego, which is all about the ideal morality that we should have, the rules and regulations in an ideal way. And then in the middle between those two extremes is our conscious ego, who is always trying to make a compromise between what we should do and what we want to do. So I think you could say all three of these elements in Freud's vision, each one of them has a voice. Each one of them has an attitude. each one of them could speak, if we could speak to each one of them. Each one of them has their own problems and their own needs. And a personality
Yes.
is a compromise between the superego and the id.
Yes.
Does that
So,
speak
yeah.
to-
So that's yes. That's exactly what I was like. I was just trying to find a middle ground where somewhere we can kind of a source of reference. I'm not sure. Maybe. And the second thing which Lavanya was talking about, she's talking about usage of words and drawing a description. So there's something which I was reading about, and there's something called semantic analysis, in which I could pass on. It's very beautifully describes as when a person is telling about themselves or a life story. Because I had mentioned in 2 sessions back that I had difficulty in starting the conversation, so I kind of worked on that. So when I was reading up about this, it says that when if a person is using a lot of adjectives or feeling words, is what they say, the person is a very emotional person. It says if the person is being very data oriented, it means the person's logical stride is more. It's a very nice read for a person who wants to make up a story. When you want to practice story therapy, it was a good read. Maybe I can pass that on. And the third one, which let me just finish off. The third one was when after I read the story that was made by Trisha and the client, I kind of thought, what kind of a story would I have brought in? And definitely, of course, this is a classic, but I was just challenging myself. And then I was thinking about this Matilda story, wherein she is given books in her life, and here the person is mystical characters is what supports her, and is like an outlet for her. And so I kind of drew a little few parallels out of that. And then the school that she went to, she it gave her a lot of opportunity, and the school that Matilda went to, it gave her the teacher who was so kind to her. So it was in a way the institution opened up new paths for the people. So that I kind of drew that this one.
Mhm. Yeah, I've heard good things about that story, Matilda, but it seems the father of the girl is is a rotten, he's not a very nice guy. And then I heard from a person who writes books for children. He said, oh yeah, we almost always make the fathers nasty people, because I don't know, it feels to me the writers of children's books kind of want to turn the children against their parents and want the children off of themselves. I'm sure I'm being paranoid, but I'm getting a little upset because there's so many children's books that have a really nasty father in them. And so the child has to get nurturing from someplace else, but usually not the father, sometimes not the mother either. Yeah, my daughter asked for there's a certain actress who's done a voice, a voice recording of Matilda. And I haven't gotten it yet because I'm resentful that the author made such a mean father. All right. Well, shall we go on? Shall we leave the Moon Rabbit story for now? Oh, and by the way, I sent that material to you in four different files, I think. Right? That was in a process because Trisha had sent me the material in an order that wasn't clear to me, so I took it apart and have reorganized it, and now I've put it in one file. So and I've done some more editing, probably since what you got. So I will send to you the one file version of it, which is updated. So please please delete the 4 files that I sent to you. And for your reference, just keep the one combined file that I will that I will send to you in a little later today. Okay.
And another thing I wanted to, sorry Eric, once again. The last PDF that you had sent was also very interesting because Trisha had gone to see what the rabbit represents in different cultures. So I thought that was very intelligent. Yeah. So the folklore of rabbit in different cultures. So that was very interesting for me. And yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking what it could have represented for the client. So I don't know. I don't think she has mentioned anything about what rabbit was in the folklore of the client's culture. But it was very interesting, pretty interesting. It was more of overall it seemed to be giving a very healing, the rabbit seemed to represent something which has got a very healing touch. So I think that was brilliant.
I'm not sure if that research is probably primarily done by Trisha because she has an academic background in folklore. But I have a feeling the client also studies and does research about different goddesses. So she was probably familiar with the rabbit mythology also. It's actually interesting because I've always wondered why the Easter bunny with Easter. What in the world is the connection between the resurrection of Jesus and Easter bunnies and Easter eggs? And it turns out that Easter time, the time of resurrection of Jesus, coincided with a special festival day for a certain goddess who was represented by rabbits, and the eggs represent birth, rebirth. So as Christianity developed, it associated itself with the certain elements of the pre-Christian religious system. So that's where the Easter eggs come from, and the Easter bunny. Okay, shall we go on? Yes. Okay. Now, Billiana, you brought up your own, either your own experience with yourself or with a client in relation to this material. Do you remember what you were referring to?
No, I'm at the moment I'm how do you say accompanying two women, also to see, because they're quite different between themselves, their way of expression, their inner world. So I'm also trying different things with them. I mentioned it because it really struck me, the work that Trisha has been doing, exactly now what you're saying, as how do you say, as a research on the symbology, on the exactness of things and so on. So this is, for example, a question for myself. For example, one of the ladies it will be our third time, maybe today, tomorrow, I'm not sure if she's available. It has a lot to do with my story of life. So it's a lady who has been on the road a long time, has a very good family, so she has never had actually a difficulty of family's issues, in the sense of mother died or father died. They're both present. They're of a good financial background. So her background as a childhood comes from a very stable home, of a home who has given her a lot of things. Throughout her puberty, she had some difficulties within the connection with her mother. So all seems quite normal, let's say. But this is probably her, because I was looking for other turning points. When her parents sent her to boarding school, I think that's the word, when she was in her adolescent life, very far away from home. So I think this was her turning point, where somehow she got emotionally interpreted a disconnection there, And throughout this, she has been traveling all the time, looking for a new home, a new family, kind of, and she cannot find it. So she's fleeing from all the situations. She stays maybe three months here, or 5 months there, and so on. So it's like a constant research of something which is, let's say, the family, no? Background. So, but she's a very logical person. So for me, this is a very emotional story because it could connect to some way to my background. I've had also good family. I've been traveling a lot, but mine was much more a research of my own expression, kind of. So I'm having difficulties specifically with her because she emotionally is very detached, let's say, or she's very rational when she's talking, when she's using the language. And I have difficulties because I'm usually working so much with image. I'm finding it very difficult how to enter, to help her to find the metaphor. Meaning that I don't want to say, look, I'm noticing this, or I'm seeing this in this image, or I was wondering, for example, how much Trisha was collaborating within the whole mythology behind the rabbit story, so that one pushes. So I'm in a bit of a difficult ground. Specifically,
at one point you used the word fleeing, that you felt your client was fleeing.
Fleeing. Yeah.
Fleeing.
Like, how do you say when?
Escaping.
Yeah, fleeing. Yeah, escaping. Yeah.
So what?
She did not use this word. I mean, this is a feeling of course. What she's using is she talks about emptiness, and it's that she's getting easily bored, so she needs to change the situation. Mm-hmm. But for me, for my understanding, and also from my previous work with clients, this is also avoiding mechanism, mm-hmm. deviating mechanism of really being able actually to stay with your feelings and what's going on. And because she's already so detached through also her language is a very logical language, so it's hard for me how to enter within her, let's say, imaginary world. Mm-hmm. Without a specific image that she has been giving me. And I'm working mostly through painting, so it's easier to invite the person to paint an image. So my question was either to find a story that has to do with the archetype of the wanderer, let's say, or to find a story from the European culture that has to do with constant change. I'm offering this discussion to everybody here, very open to hear what you can accompany and help me, and so that I can invite her to maybe try and switch the language she's using, mm-hmm. so that she gets in touch with herself as well.
Well, based on my own...
I tried to do the one person and third person. This was our second session. She did it. She didn't say specifically she found any deeper effect on that. It was much easier for her, yes, to observe herself from far when she's talking as a third person, so that she can see a faster way of her evolution, or the points of the geography, the places where she has been. But I'm lacking, or maybe this is my observation, I'm still lacking an emotional response there somehow. Maybe I'm expecting it too much as well. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Okay, well, judging from my own experience, my own life story, my own life, I could not begin to find any peace until until my career came into focus as a teacher about storytelling, mm-hmm. And until I was living in the right place, which for me is Chennai, India. Mm. So, and these two things are related. The story work and the location I'm in are very related. So I would also ask you to ask your client, I mean, what is her, does she have a career? Is she developing a career? How is that going?
She yeah.
Hmm?
she's what is this in English? She's I don't know exactly how it is in English, but she's working with children with difficulties, development skills, and so on. So it's also very, very interesting, the story that came with the Moon Rabbit, because it has to do afterwards with working with youths or with children. So in the developmental process, the need to make a change there or accompany that change.
So does she seem to be? Is she in love with this work?
I think she's not. This is what I'm saying. I have the feeling she's not emotionally very attached to anything at the moment. She's happy. She's not fully exercising it, but she seems to me, that's an observation, still kind of lost and still kind of looking and searching. But it's the first time that here in Barcelona she's trying to stay more than 1 year. So this is already a first step for her to say more consciously, I would like to do something within a deeper attachment to something.
You might ask her to express either in words or in pictures or in some way. Is she happy? If she's not happy, why isn't she happy? What could make her more happy? What might make her more happy? What might she like to be doing professionally? Let her draw different pictures of herself with children, or maybe she'd prefer to work with teenagers, or maybe she'd prefer to work with adults. Working with special ed children, it's a very emotionally demanding field, because a lot of those children are they have lifelong conditions. A lot of them will never be self-independent.
Yeah, of course.
And so it's a very different thing than doing psychoanalysis with people. So people have to find out what they love to do and what they're good at. Maybe so I would suggest encouraging her to explore what she really wants to do, what she really loves doing, what she really feels she's good at. That's part of it. And in terms of place, let her experiment, fantasize all the different possible places she has been, she could be. You can ask her, if you could be any place in the world, where would you like to be? Let her draw a picture.
How do you say? I gave her how do you say in English? Something like a homework to. The only thing I could really feel is, because she always talks about the search of something ideal as a family, but she didn't mean an intimate relationship. She meant it more like a family of friends, a community type of. I gave her the homework, if she can write or at least think about, to tell me how she sees this ideally. So what is this community about, or is this a place? How are the people? So I'm waiting for the next meeting to see if this is also a point where we can do some work there.
So have any metaphors come up with her?
She didn't come back to me with this. I'm saying this is the one that it's coming. It's the homework that she's preparing so that we can see.
I think I've mentioned a very popular metaphor for people who are searching and experimenting and traveling is the seed that is trying to get in the earth and put down roots. And then bloom. So you might suggest that to her. That's such a common, that's such a cliche, but still you might mention it to her in terms of giving her ideas about other possible metaphors. Okay, who else? Who else is working? Bronwyn, do you have a client?
I do. I think I mentioned last time her parents, who were the main source of her problem, dying, and her father died 2 days after I spoke to them, so she's away the other end of the country and won't come back. But my issue, although I don't have a background at all No, that's a lie. I do. I have lots of stories in my background. But the idea of pulling one out and making use of it, particularly with someone who doesn't have the same background, is beyond me a tad. Also, I worked with another client this morning, not so much I was working on her business story, but there was a lot of psychology involved in that as well. There are so many different paths that you can go down. So the first client, her metaphor, and she's using it in business. If you're familiar with, is it Napoleon Hill? I believe I achieved this whole attraction thing. So she's working with that, but her metaphor that just came out of her without being asked was, so she was describing it as something that's stopping you, that like a brick wall. And then there is swimming, where I imagine that to be sort of meditative, creative thinking. And then there is, it's been a while now, she described something else, and I have known her for a while. She will take something on and she will do it with grit and determination, and nothing will stop her. And so there's that metaphor. And then there is this family that is criticizing her. And as far as I can see, all they see is this grit. And I think she's probably not considering them. She's just decided this is how things need to be dealt with, and I'm going to deal with them like that. And they are sort of dealing with that. They're not seeing the creative process that went through to it, or the emotional trauma or whatever beforehand. So I gave her that to think about, but I asked her to tell each situation that she came up with where they criticised her in the third person. And this is where I think I'm trying to make it too complicated, because I thought if I can get her to think how they're seeing her, I don't think she is seeing that they are responding to her from their own point of view rather than hers. And rather than saying, excuse me, what have you thought about these people? I thought I'd ask her to write what someone outside of her would be seeing in the third person, what they see, not what she sees, but what they see, hoping to point out that all they are seeing is this determined, gritted, hard person, and not the soft, creative person. And you can hear I'm not focused. I'm not, because I'm talking so much. Obviously, I don't see how to pull like techniques together, I guess. How do you follow one technique through? Do you then stop that? And then, because our stories are intertwined everywhere.
So you're speaking about one client now, right? You mentioned another, but
yes.
But
well, same thing with the second one. The second one today, there were so many. Oh my goodness, she had one big aha that we uncovered, but there were 3 or 4 different things that I'm thinking I need to pick up on that thing and follow it through. But trying to put them together so that there can be one outcome or a cohesive outcome. How do you deal with all these little things that you see in a person's story? I think it's like sort of unraveling a mess. And there's all these bits, but they kind of don't relate to each other, or they do in some ways. How do you follow up on each one?
Well, I hope you're writing things down. I hope you're keeping a journal so you can, get things down on paper or on a computer and then reorganize them. I think if you do that, things will fall into place.
So can you kind of talk with your client and say, look, I'm following this up, and then I want to follow that up, and maybe they'll talk like that to someone. It's sort of meta. It's not.
Your voice was breaking up a little bit, but yes, I mean, I think the important thing is to take in and remember all the pieces that she's giving you, and all the pieces that are coming up in your mind. So the best way to do that is just to write them down. either during the session or right afterwards. And then, you know, the human mind is a wonderful thing. When we review material that's down there on paper, we automatically start putting things together.
So am I asking too much of myself to be able to do it within the session? It's okay to be able to say, look, I just need to go home and process all this, and then I'll get back to you with the next steps I think we should take?
Sure. And I wouldn't think in terms of, you know, giving a client a story. I would think more in terms of coming up with metaphors that the client feels, you know, relates to her experience in life, and then together seeing what stories come up out of those metaphors.
Excellent. Good. Thank you.
Liliana.
Eric, again, I have a question here. Maybe Bronwyn, it's somehow also related from what Bronwyn was saying. How long would this process be? In the sense that if you have a person maybe that is because also Bronwyn maybe is now intertwining things, so she's not precise and let's say not so focused and knowing how to draw a line, but still, what is the aim of a therapy like this? Is that the person tries, meaning within 3 or 4 times, that the person tries to get out some new image, that it's helpful, that it's guiding, that it's healing, or it's more about re-questioning and reconsidering the life story? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah,
and this also...
I'm not sure that Bronwyn is doing therapy. I think she's doing more consulting and coaching. But
so this is a short-term goal thing. If it's more coaching, I guess then you could. I mean, that's also obviously depending on the difficulty and the problem that you're discussing. But then be able also to say to your client, look, we have 10 sessions, and within these 10 sessions, we need to draw these and these lines and this goal. Whilst within psychoanalysis, it's a much bigger sea. So somehow this also comes back to a different question for me, which is there that doesn't need an answer, but how can we use life story also for short-term goal oriented therapy or psychoanalysis or whatever. So I'm just giving a feedback.
I've found 3 sessions you can get a lot done. The first session is really get the life story. Second session is, you know, go over it and talk about metaphors. And third session is playing around with possible healing stories or fragments of healing stories. But as mentioned, I think for psychological counseling, the standard idea is 8 weekly sessions with maybe follow-up sessions once in a while after that. And as you know, psychoanalysis, classically, it's once or twice a week for at least 3 years. And some people, you know, do it just forever, perpetually.
Yeah.
So it's all totally flexible. Now we'll go 15 minutes or so overtime, but if anyone needs to leave very soon, why don't you speak now and tell us a little bit about any process that's happening with you. Go ahead, Smita. Smita, then Lavanya. Okay? Go ahead, Smita.
So today was the 3rd session I had with this person, and as I mentioned earlier, she's a friend who I have who I've known for many years, but I haven't met. It's been more than 2 decades since we've met, and so we met again, and so it was a fresh start for me when she told about her life story. But as Bronwyn said, I experienced the same situation because I don't know. It's like when the client initially there was a hiccup about where to start, and then once I figured that out, and it started about the life story, and she was a little more open to share. Then there was so much of information overload. And so what I did is I kind of went back and I wrote the entire story in the form of a story. I actually wrote it. It went on for 3 pages. And then I picked all the turning points, and I kind of put it as turning point 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then somewhere in the discussion in the past, you had mentioned that there are 3 or 4 turning points. And then I happen to have, when I don't remember, some session you said there are in someone's life there are 3 or 4. So I kind of jotted down 5, 6, I guess. And then I went on to understand to prioritize which one. And then the second session, when I met her, we went over these things and we were discussing in general. um, and then she came up with with a story on her own. And she was relating herself to another character. So that was an interesting twist in the tale for me. So it kind of see, the idea here was not to heal. So she has not had any trauma or any loss, and she's actually been having a smooth life. And so I can relate to that. But the which I didn't realize. I thought, okay, so there's nothing that what can I offer? So, but today, which is the third session, we were trying to figure out I kind of picked out 3 stories, which were which were similar to what the stories that about her life story that she shared. And she was very happy because today, like for example, today I spoke about the goddess Ganga, and how she had to make a choice about how, as an empowered woman, she chose to dictate the terms of marriage to Shantanu. It's a very lovely track for those who don't know. The goddess chooses to marry when the man comes and proposes to her, and she lays down her terms saying that this, and only if you abide by this am I going to be your wife. And then later on, when he doesn't keep up to his terms and conditions, so she just walks away. And the child that she leaves behind is Bhishma, because of which the entire Mahabharata, the epic, it follows. So she's a very prime character in this in the epic called Mahabharata. So when I did that, there was such a change in the process today. And actually today we ended off the so she has always been mystified, the person I'm speaking to. She's always been very happy about the icon of Krishna. So the Lord to her shows so many different shades of love, lust, and she also mentioned anger, and deceitfulness. So these were the words that she had mentioned. And today, when we started off the session, it was beautiful when she started off saying that, you know what, Smita, uh, I think I am now, I am going in a journey and I'm not finding an end to it, because I want to find what's the ultimate truth. And I'm like, okay, this is really gone a little too, away from. So she told me that the interactions of the last 2 sessions, she got back to me and she said that actually there is a constant truth which is there in the Gita, which is by Krishna. And she said that that constant and absolute truth is something which is within every human, irrespective of culture, caste, background, a criminal, a good man, a god man. Everybody has an ultimate truth. So she went on to talk about the importance of the breath, the importance of the life itself. So today the session was so beautiful. And when we discussed the stories, it was really I don't know. Today I felt today I've done something over the few weeks that we met. And ironically, today was also the first day I had a session with another person who I'm not an acquaint, who is not a good, is not, I mean, not in relation. and it's a friend's friend, and she came forward, and she has a past, and she has a tragic story, and so today I'm feeling a little good that I'm equipped to handle this, maybe what in your words, coach. So today this is what happened, and I thought I wanted to share it with you guys.
Great. Wonderful. And you try to bring in movement in your work, right? Whatever work you're doing, you look at body language?
No, she's not comfortable with it. As Bilyana, somebody had pointed out saying that, am I audible?
Yes.
Hello? Okay.
Yes,
Somebody had pointed out saying that they are, having, so I try to see, I'll tell you how I use movement. I told her when she was telling about this, she's always a constant, she's on loggerheads with her mother. So I told her, okay, why don't you talk to your mother? Why don't you talk as your mother? And you talk to your daughter as a mother, and I do it through movement. And I think I kind of pushed her a little too much. She says, no, I'm not comfortable, I don't want to do this. So she was not comfortable, so I did push it. But I want to use movement, but it just didn't work out with this.
Was she interested in doing it verbally with speaking to her mother, communicating with her mother?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. This was very interesting. When she started speaking about as her mother, she had become it was a very argument sort of. It was very an argumentative this thing. And then she herself broke off the conversation. I'm assuming that it was, I kind of maybe pushed her a little too much. I don't know. But then my question is here, Eric, is there is, I don't know, it might sound very weird, but there's this sort of lull which happens, after this process of interaction. And like when we speak, I mean, when I speak to you and you're absorbing, and there is a lull when you talk. I mean, I don't know if others have observed that. It's I don't know, it's kind of that was a little difficult for me. There's the gap. How do you fill in the gap when because I'm processing information in my head, and she has kind of had a let out. Is that the right word? I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's kind of yeah, I don't know, that I was a little it's not embarrassing, it's
well, I think it's nice to have a little lull in the conversation once in a while. It shows that a lot's been happening, and that both parties need to take it in, and then the conversation will start again. But a lull, like any pause, is a signal that wow, a lot's been happening. We need a few moments to take it in. Well, we should be comfortable with a little silence with each other.
As long as it doesn't boredom.
Yeah, I don't think it's a sign of boredom.
Okay.
I think it's a sign of, a sign that one has taken in a lot and now wondering how to follow it up. Okay. So Maya, have you had someone who you're meeting with?
Yes, today we had our third session, and I started to write about to send for you, but I need to translate first, and I don't know if I can translate until our next meeting, but I want to write and translate and send to you. Today was a beautiful session, and she did feedback about our work together. And her feedback was so interesting. She said when she could to create an image about her feelings, about her story, he could give more comprehension. He could has more comprehension and about her story, and with this she could to sorry, I think I said he, but it's she could to deal better with her present life situation. And we, in the first session, I could see she doesn't appreciate so much herself, and today we get this point, and she talk about this. Her vision is I can appreciate myself.
Mm-hmm. Good.
But I will write about all the process and send and share with you. I want so much to do that.
Great. Please do that. Yeah, I think a number of people have told me lately that just the fact that they're considering their life story and the story of their experiences as stories on the same level as a fairy tale, or on the same level as a story from an epic, that this has given them a feeling that they are more significant than they thought they were, because they realize that they also exist, they also have a story, and the difference is that our own stories, usually we don't write them down, they don't get on television, they don't get in books, they don't get in the media. So our existence and our importance is not confirmed by media. But if one just imagines it and shares it with someone, then one brings one's story into existence, and it exists on the same level or on a similar level as any other story. Okay, Lavanya, tell us something.
Yeah, so finally there is somebody who has agreed to be my client. Mm-hmm. And I just know a little about her. I know her a little about her. So from what I know, she's had, her father was kidnapped and he was murdered. And her husband, also she lost her husband when their child was about 1 or 2 years of age. And the child is now grown up. He's about 16 years old. And we're just in the process of, I still need to talk to her, but now she's not available because she's gone to her hometown and she's coming back only by the 16th of May. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I don't want to take this conversation over the phone because it's too emotional. I feel that I should be present personally to discuss things which are very sensitive to her. Mm-hmm. So in the process, in the meanwhile, I'm also looking at some other people who would be willing to volunteer for my work. So that is where I stand.
So with a client like that, you have to really ask her.
So there's just been one conversation which has happened.
So you really have
There was just one conversation that has happened which has made me understand something about her background,
Mhm.
but still the complete life story of what she is or how she's quite busy. She conducts a lot of classes. So from the little time that we got to speak, this was what I understood of her whatever background.
Mhm.
But there is still so much that she has to tell me for me to understand where she stands and what she's looking at after the session.
Mhm. Well, you need to ask
Yes.
her, and you also need to get your own sense of what does she need to do now in terms of therapeutic work or life coaching work. What does she need to recover from? What does she need to make peace with? Well, what is she's had a number of very challenging situations in her past. So
That's right. That's right.
you have to find out which of these she wants to work through.
That's right. I think I need to ask her that and see which one she wants to address in particular, or does she want to just say how she's been, going through these things. It's been a pretty long time since all this happened,
Mm-hmm.
but I seriously feel that I need to be there to listen to her story. So that I don't think there is any point in me talking to her over the phone or Skype and trying to talk to her now. No,
Mm-hmm.
I feel the personal connection has to happen.
Yeah, and then as I've mentioned, when one of our approaches is tell me your life story. That's a big, long thing. Another approach is just ask your client, are you happy? If you're not happy, why aren't you happy? What's the number one reason you're not happy? What's the number one frustration that you're feeling or sadness that you're feeling? That'll get to it.
Yeah. Sure.
Great. Okay, so we'll shall we stop recording?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll stop recording.